Putin versus Trudeau, greater versus mid-range narcissist. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. When two narcissists come together, this is often a point of interest for people. How will they react? Will they get along? Do they recognize one another? Will they be civil or will they fall out? Will they actively conspire together to further their aims as against other people? There are a variety of different outcomes, and it depends upon the situation and the types of narcissists that are involved. For instance, differing outcomes occur in respect of whether the coming together is in an intimate relationship, whether it is a social interaction, whether they are familial, whether it is business-related. It also matters with regard to the issue of the types of narcissist, whether they have an awareness, if they're greater or the ultra, or whether they are unaware, being lesser and mid-range. It also is important with regard to the relevant levels of facade management and control. In some instances, the narcissist will initially, for instance in an intimate scenario, seek to seduce one another, and initially all may appear well. Thereafter, it is the case that with many interactions between narcissists, particularly those of lesser and mid-range, where they come together romantically, disaster will soon approach. You can learn more about that in my videos When Narcissists Collide, parts 1 and 2. In some situations, there is what's called narcissistic cementation, which is where the narcissists actively coexist. It isn't smooth sailing. There will be disputes between the two, but it can outwardly present an image of a successful partnership. And again, my video Narcissistic Cementation explains more about that. But what about the situation when you have the leaders of two countries that come together? Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was involved in a discussion with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. I've extensively analysed Putin, and you can find that detailed analysis on the Ultra channel should you wish to further your understanding of Putin. He is a narcissistic psychopath and is detailed as a lower, greater narcissist. This means he knows what he is. That isn't to say that he refers to himself as a lower, greater narcissist. He understands that he requires control. He understands that he requires the reactions of other people. He becomes bored easily. He recognizes that it requires stimulation. He knows that he's manipulative and enjoys it, and accordingly, he also operates with a facade of the hard man. Not to say that he isn't one, but it is the iron fist and the velvet glove approach. As for Justin Trudeau, again, he has been determined to be a narcissist, and his categorization is upper mid-range. This means that he's not aware of what he is in the way that Vladimir Putin is. He exhibits some charm, some polish. No doubt some Canadians will disagree with that assessment, but objectively that is the case. He's clearly successful, being an individual of money, and of course that he managed to get himself into the position of being Canada's Prime Minister. He is manipulative also, but much of it is done instinctively. And in an instance where he and a greater come together, it doesn't necessarily mean that there is going to be a dispute from the off. But what we see in a short clip of an interaction between the two of them at some form of conference or meeting is the way that the actions of Trudeau are interpreted by Putin and the nature of the interaction between the two of them. Here is the short clip. note that Trudeau, the taller of the two men, is making a point with a degree of animation towards Putin. He is asserting control physically by standing close to Putin and making his point with a gesticulation. This gesticulation attracts the attention of one of Putin's bodyguards. Putin is one of the most heavily bodyguarded world leaders on the planet, and they are highly trained and ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. You'll observe, therefore, that the gentleman wearing the lighter suit enters the frame to check on what is going on. You will see, however, that notwithstanding the fact that Trudeau is stood very close to Putin and is gesticulating, that Putin is entirely relaxed. As a consequence of the absence of anxiety because of his psychopathy, the fact that he doesn't process fear in the same way that other people do, he gives a self-assured position. And he also has the awareness of what is going on around him. This is something that often comes from the psychopath. There is this awareness of all of the movement that is taking place. And therefore, he's aware of the other people in the room whilst he's listening to what Justin Trudeau has to say. But he also notices the movement of the bodyguard. And in an easy and fluid motion, he just lifts his hand to state, "You can back off. I am in control." This is demonstrative of this interaction between two narcissists, whereby Trudeau is the more animated, and this doesn't pose a problem for Putin. Other narcissists, below a greater, may well find the fact of Trudeau getting so close to them invasive and too much of a threat to control that will cause them to move away from him. They may also find that his gesticulation amounts to a threat to control that would necessitate them perhaps taking a step back and even allowing the intervention of a bodyguard. But a lower greater, such as Putin, who is imbued with this innate sense of control over his situation, a calmness, a rigorous mind that's applied to manipulation, takes it all in his stride. He's listening, absorbing what Trudeau has to say. He's measured in his responses. There's no sudden activity from Putin. There is no startled response, for he has no startled reflex. He remains in control of the situation, notwithstanding the proximity of Trudeau and the gesticulations that he is engaging in. He doesn't even need to turn to the bodyguard to look to him to see what he's doing, to seek reassurance. The level of control that Putin feels is such that he can simply lift his hand, and the bodyguard, recognizing that, retreats. This demonstrates perhaps the apex predator in complete control of his environment, notwithstanding the actions of another narcissist who would experience anxiety, and whilst confident of himself, he would be crashing up against the rock that is Vladimir Putin, which is demonstrated by the appearance of calm and control that the Russian leader exhibits. Only a short clip, but it is an interesting example of how the more demonstrative upper mid-ranger potentially threatens the control of the lower greater, but the lower greater is completely in control of the situation, unruffled, unmoved, and even to the extent that he can simply raise his hand, and with that give the authority to his bodyguard. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for watching.